For far too long, there's been a dominant narrative that's misleading and provides misinformation. But Democrats are actually the ones fighting for everyday folks, fighting on behalf of working families, fighting for fairness, fighting to make sure you can go to a park and play, and make sure that our public lands are protected for future generations to come. For far too long, my GOP colleagues have dug a hole that we're trying to dig out of. In a time where we have revenue that has surpassed our expectations, we're last in the nation, and we've been starving public services and the very things that we're constitutionally bound to. And it's time to stop. We need more courageous leaders. We need to fight the politics and the play and the theater in the State House. And we have to do the work of the people instead of the work of politicians. And more than anything else, we value education and quality schools and our teachers, because why? That's our future as our children. We know that.
We want to provide a uniform, thorough, free, public, common education, and that it just isn't happening right now.
Idaho is ranked 51st in per pupil spending, which we've been there for quite some time, and that's very disheartening.
As an educator who lives the reality of limited spending and lack of funds in our public school system, it's continually challenging. It's hard to say that we value public education. It's difficult, for folks to wrap their heads around what it takes to run a school and the people power that it takes to be able to meet the needs of students when we're not able to adequately provide them a living wage, when they can go down the street to any fast food restaurant and make $2 more an hour.
People say, well, money doesn't do everything. No, you're right. But money sure could help a lot of the processes and make it easier keeping what wonderful staff we have.
I don't want to be in a race to the bottom. I want to be in a race to the top.
Think what we could do if we truly were up a few slots in that funding.
One of the most heartbreaking moments of last session was when GOP legislators turned down a $6 million grant from the federal government that would not have cost Idaho taxpayers a dime.
$6 million that was going to infuse dollars into our rural small communities, including our larger communities.
We're one of only 4 states in the entire country that doesn't have pre-K funding. It's really a need, and we have to do better. And the reasons for turning it down were absolutely ridiculous.
When we have fellow colleagues in the legislature that says, oh, women need to stay at home.
Any bill that makes it easier or more convenient for mothers to come out of the home and let somebody else raise their child, I just don't think that's a good direction for us to be going.
That was just such a slap in the face, particularly to our rural communities. So disrespectful to all of us.
Not fully funding education means it hurts our students and limits our teachers.
And when people say there's a surplus, no. We have underfunded education for 30 years.
Who's in charge of the Education Committee? Not a Democrat. Who's in charge of JFAC? Not a Democrat.
The Idaho Democratic Party really talks to me because I'm a working person. And I understand that working people we're the base of Idaho. I think, one of the most important things that we can do for Idaho families is to increase the minimum wage here. The federal minimum wage being $7.25 an hour. When you calculate that out, if you had a full-time job and worked every hour available to you, 40 hours a week, that equates to being under $16,000 a year for a single individual. You can't live on that in the state of Idaho without some sort of assistance. There's a misnomer thought that people working at minimum wage are starting their career. They're young teenagers or maybe college students working. But honestly, the numbers show that 60% of people working at minimum wage are over the age of 25. We need to bump that minimum wage just so that our small businesses can be more successful.
Speaking of the workforce crisis that we have and the low wages, and I think sometimes People think, well, there's been an increase in wages in the last couple of years. You know, the pandemic and the shutdown has forced us and businesses and organizations to increase their wages to try to recruit and attract a workforce. But the fact is, our housing prices, the rental costs, our property taxes are through the roof. We continue to make the top 5 in the country for how expensive it is to live here. And that's not exactly the top 5 list I want to make as a native Idahoan.
You know, I'm tired of my GOP colleagues not listening to the constituents of Idaho. And the biggest concern people have are property taxes and a lack of affordable housing. A fundamental part of who we are is where we live and feeling safe and secure in our homes, and that's never been more important than it is today.
We are in an extremely tight housing market that we've never seen before, and renters are at a huge disadvantage.
We have a housing shortage, we have property taxes booming, we have elderly folks looking to save their homes so they don't have to move into another place. We have renters struggling to pay the bills. Can't put food on their table because the rent is so high.
We as Democrats have tried to put forth just simple solutions to try to create a level playing field. We keep getting blocked by the Republicans.
One of the biggest things in which we are failing here at the legislature is actually committing to meaningful property tax reduction. Years ago, we put a cap on the homeowner exemption. As a result, residential property owners are carrying the burden.
The best thing to do is just increase the homeowners exemption. It got capped in 2016 by my GOP colleagues. I'm not sure why, but they could uncap it and we could clear up this problem. The homeowners exemption is the #1 and the easiest way to relieve property tax burdens.
Housing and healthcare are high priorities for Democrats because they're high priorities for Idaho families. These are the bread and butter issues that Idaho families like mine are thinking about. These are the things that keep us up at night. I have a son with a chronic medical condition, and for some time he required prescription formula for him to be able to get the nutrients he needs. Being the parent of a child with a chronic health condition, this is not something that he chose or that we could have really prevented. And there are thousands of Idahoans every day living with chronic health care conditions that need access to whether it be prescription formula, insulin. We believe as Idaho Democrats that cost should never be a barrier to them getting the care that they need.
The majority of Idahoans actually also would like to see a regulated system of medical marijuana for the severely ill, not just terminally ill, but there are a lot of people who would benefit greatly from medical marijuana. I worked with a gentleman who is a highly decorated long-term Air Force veteran who now has terminal cancer and is being forced into extremely dangerous opioid use when his doctors say what he really needs is medical marijuana to address his pain. Unfortunately, those across the aisle on the Republican side are moving in the opposite direction. They spent much of the session trying to amend the Idaho Constitution to put a permanent, eternal ban on cannabis for any purpose, so that we would never be able to legalize medical marijuana or any form of marijuana.
Republicans in the legislature blocked Medicaid expansion for so long because they were more concerned with sticking it to the federal government than they were with what Idahoans really wanted. When we passed Medicaid expansion, we sent a message to the legislature that this is a priority for us and that we put Idahoans' health care over petty political fights with the federal government.
You know, one thing that really makes Idaho special is our public lands. We love the rugged nature of our state, and we want to enjoy it for future generations.
Idaho is really special to me because there's so much public land that's available. Not every state has this amount of public land that you can go and hunt and fish and do the things that you want to do.
It's for everyone. It's not just for the wealthy. The part of the problem is you see wealthy people, corporations coming in and they're gobbling up all of the land. And then, well, where do the hunters go?
This is the solid gold asset of Idaho. It's why so many people want to move here. It's why so many people want to be here. And what we've seen the GOP supermajority do in this building is bow down to the desires of out-of-state billionaires and take away access to public lands with incredibly unfair and restrictive trespassing laws that make it impossible for you to access the lands that you own as a member of the public. Democrats have fought these at every step of the way.
Public lands access to me is, I think, one of the things that I'm most concerned about. I've lived in Idaho my whole life, have hunted and fished in Idaho my whole life, and have seen some amazingly spectacular things, and we need to protect the opportunity for future generations of Idahoans to see those same amazing things that happen when you're out in the woods, and you get to see 2 deer pushing each other around or 2 elk pushing each other around.
Democrats recognize that hunting and gun ownership is important to everyone in Idaho. It isn't just for Republicans.
Hunting is a tradition for everybody. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. It's American tradition. It's our heritage.
I think I'm running as a Democrat because I'm a hunter and an angler. Because we're the ones that are trying to ensure that our greatest natural resource, our pristine waters and our amazing public lands are protected.
Democrats, when you look at the policies that we advocate, we are pretty squarely out here fighting for working families. And when you see the policies that are put forward by the Republicans, tends to favor much more of the wealthy and well-connected. They brag about how they had the biggest tax cut in history, $600 million.
We see it again and again at the State House. The GOP brings a bill that's completely lopsided and favors the wealthy and well-connected. And they repeated that again this year, where we saw huge tax breaks for corporations and people at the top of the income spectrum and breadcrumbs for everybody else.
They zeroed in on the way that would get $13,000 checks to millionaires and $75 checks to working families.
And these checks are designed to go out quickly and before the May primary to buy votes, but giving no long-term help, giving no long-term boost to Idaho's working families.
Idaho has something called the Constitutional Defense Fund, which is money that the state allocates to defend laws that get challenged in court. And this is very frustrating because a lot of the time we know these laws are unconstitutional before they're even passed, and it's costing taxpayers a lot of money and is extremely avoidable. And actually the Constitutional Defense Fund isn't even where it ends. That wasn't enough slush funds for them to monkey around with our laws in unconstitutional ways. They created a legislative defense fund that they also put millions of dollars into for them to basically spend on anything they want, whether it's to litigate against one of our paraplegic legislators who is seeking reasonable accommodations to do her job, or to jump in as an extra party in the case trying to shut down people's ballot initiative rights in a case that was already being litigated by the Attorney General. One of the worst efforts we've seen at voter suppression coming from the GOP majority was a bill to criminalize, make it a felony to help your neighbor deliver their ballot. If you have a neighbor who might have a disability or elderly or for whatever reason has difficulty picking up their ballot or dropping it off themselves, and they ask you to drop it off at the ballot drop-off location for them, and you faithfully drop it off for them, you would go to jail for 6 months. And it really begs the question, why are Republicans so worried about voters having the power to get what they want?
I'm proud to be an Idaho Democrat. We're hardworking and we're working on behalf of Idaho's families.
The Idaho Democratic Party really just represents fairness.
Idaho Democrats are committed to ensuring that everybody has quality of life that they choose, and we're going to continue to back that, we're going to continue to fight for it, and we're going to continue to represent you.
The farm issues that I have out here, those are democratic issues. Those are family issues. Those are issues about people. And we have to start talking to people.
There's been one party in charge in this building for nearly 2 decades. Has your life gotten any better? Are your taxes actually lower? Are your wages higher? Is your cost of living what it used to be? And do your wages cover that cost of living? That's the questions you need to ask yourself.
And the Democratic Party appeals to me because it cares for the working family.
I'm an Idaho Democrat because no other party ever gave a damn about me. Whether it comes to housing, healthcare, or other basic human needs and basic human rights.
There's so many bills that we're presenting and we won't stop. We are fearless, we will not give up, and we will fight for the everyday Idahoan.
And helping others and lifting each other up and a unified vision. That's what it means to be an Idaho Democrat to me.
That's why I'm a supporter of Idaho Democrats.
Welcome to being an Idaho Democrat.
Only you can help the Idaho Democratic Party build the kind of power that we need to secure these most basic needs for everyday Idahoans.
If you can volunteer your time, we appreciate your time. If you've got some money burning a hole in your pocket, we could all use some donations. We hope to see you out and about. Hopefully we get to knock on your door. I hope we can all count on your votes.